Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today we've got some pretty interesting things to go over. So, some pretty big news broke for Ubisoft late yesterday afternoon. I wanted to get to it as soon as possible, so that's why I'm making this now. Because while what we're going to talk about does not directly tie into The Division, the implications of this news could potentially be big for The Division in the long term, meaning potential increased support for The Division 2 or The Division 3. All of this kind of echoes back to the ghost of The Division Heartland, right? There's some interesting things here. And more than anything, I really just wanted to talk about this. So, we're going to get right to it, and if you enjoy videos like this and you want to stay up to date on everything with the Division franchise, whatever it may be, then I hope you will consider clicking that subscribe button if you've not already, because you will find it right here. But, without further ado, let's go. Alright, so let's just get into the big news right off the bat here, and that is that XDefiant, Ubisoft's free-to-play arena shooter, which mashed up all of their different IPs into one game, has been cancelled, or in their words, sunset. That means that as of today, I think, development on the game has ended. You can no longer even download it, and my guess is that due to contractual obligations, they are required to support it through at least June of 2025. They're still going to release an additional season for existing players. This was the full quote that they put out. I'll put it up on screen. Dear players, important message, XDefiant is sunsetting. Thank you for your incredible support and dedication to XDefiant. We regret to inform you that we are initiating the sunset process starting today, December 3rd, 2024. As a result, new downloads, player registrations, and purchases will no longer be available. Season 3 will still launch, the servers will remain active, and the game will be fully playable until June 3rd, 2025. So, there you go. That is something. Some people might say that they are bummed out by this. Some people say the writing was on the wall. The fact is, XDefiant had its lovers, it had its haters. Personally, I was always somewhere right in the middle, right? I still have the game downloaded on my console. I would play it from time to time. But definitely for us Division fans, I think one of the most interesting elements to all of this is that, as I have previously covered and explained here on the channel, XDefiant began development as a dedicated Division first-person shooter spin-off. It was eventually morphed and made into the Ubisoft IP mashup that it is today, but if you go and play the game, all of the weapon models, the majority of the maps, and all of that stuff were from The Division, and so yeah, it's just kind of crazy now to see the full trajectory of where that project and game went. But that is the big news, that XDefiant is cancelled, essentially, but what does this mean for Ubisoft, and more specifically for The Division? One of the big people to cover this story was Tom Henderson. He's a very notable figure within the games industry as a reporter, leaker, all of that. In his coverage, he put this quote out which says, Ubisoft San Francisco and Osaka will be shut down, and around 170 to 180 people will be laid off. Those not affected will move on to other Ubisoft projects. Today is the last day for some employees. And then I just wanted to note that this was amended by Stephen Totillo, who added correction, update, cuts expected to be closer to 277, not 177. And while the Ubisoft San Francisco production studio is closing, the business offices there will remain open. So, that is pretty wild, right? We've seen cancellations before at Ubisoft, even within our own franchise with The Division Heartland, which we'll get back to in a minute. But for them to not only cancel XDefiant, but to also shutter these studios for good is a pretty drastic step. And so, it goes without saying, my thoughts go out to those let go and having their studios closed. That is just an immense stab in the gut. I'm sure that these developers put forth their best work, and unfortunately, Ubisoft management yet again was just not able to hold up their end. But with that said, let's now specifically hone in on the question that I'm sure many of you are asking: how does this tie into The Division? Well, as Tom Henderson said in his quote, the other developers that are not being laid off will be moved on to other Ubisoft projects. And in the internal memo that Yves Guillemot released, who for any who don't know is the CEO of Ubisoft, he said, we wanted to take a firm and clear decision to enable us to concentrate our investments and forces on more profitable projects. And so look, as much as people like to hate on The Division 2, har, it's still going after all this time, it has now outlasted so many other, new and shiny Ubisoft projects that management likes to prop up. Those have all crashed and burned, and yet here The Division 2 is still chugging on almost 6 years later. And so, it goes without saying from what Yves said, from what Tom said, that any number of the impacted XDefiant devs worldwide could potentially end up on the Division 2 development team. However, more specifically, I want to take a look at Red Storm Entertainment. Now, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Red Storm if you've been around the channel or the Division community for any length of time. They are a Ubisoft studio located within North Carolina, and their history, at least relevant to the Division, is that they were a main support studio for the Division 1 ever since 2014 or 15, possibly even earlier than that. They notably led the development of the beloved 1.8 update for that first game. They then went on to also be the lead support studio on the Division 2's initial development. They primarily handled the Dark Zones and PvP content. It was then in late 2019 2019 and early 2020 that they were moved on to begin working on The Division Heartland, right? The pitched free-to-play survival extraction shooter spin-off that I'm sure many of you will remember. Now, one side note that I wanted to make here, I know that this news of XDefiant's cancellation will reopen the Heartland wound for many. That being because, and I've already seen this in many places online, a lot of people have really latched on to the sentiment and idea that Heartland was canceled for XDefiant, right? It was like they took the two projects and just chose XDefiant over Heartland. I have never prescribed to that narrative personally. I think there's a lot more to that story overall, and hopefully in the years to come, more information will come out on that so that we can kind of talk about it more broadly. But I just want to throw that out there. That's kind of a side note. Heartland was worked on until May of this year before its cancellation was announced. Obviously, we covered that in great detail back when that happened. And it was said at the time that the teams working on the game, and most specifically the lead studio of Red Storm, would be moved on to support development on titles like Rainbow Six Siege and the now late XDefiant. And I took a screenshot of Red Storm's Blue Sky profile just before making this video, and it still says on there that they are a co-dev on XDefiant, right? This is still what they were working on up until its cancellation this week. And so that is kind of the million-dollar question that I want to pose in this video. What will Ubisoft have Red Storm doing now that XDefiant is no more? Now, there are obviously a lot of different possibilities. One of those, and this is probably the least exciting for us Division fans, Ubisoft could have Red Storm turn to fully focus on supporting Rainbow Six Siege or another IP like the new Ghost Recon that is rumored to be in development. Another possibility, however, is that like Ubisoft Red Links, who is one of the support studios on the Division Heartland project, and we covered this back in the summer that when Heartland was canceled, they were moved on to work on the Division 2 team. They are now one of the main contributors to the project. It's entirely possible that with XDefiant's cancellation, some of Red Storm Entertainment's staff and devs and all of that get put back onto the Division 2 all these years later to support the future content plans that we know that the game has. Or, and this might be the most exciting for many people, or maybe the Division 2 idea would be, who knows, it's possible that they could join on as one of the first major support studios for Tom Clancy's The Division 3. From all indications that we have, development on The Division 3 is now well underway. Whether or not that is in the pre-production or main production phase, I don't yet know, but it very much seems to be one of, if not the largest projects over at Massive Entertainment right now. Since Star Wars Outlaws has been released, they've also said that they're working on a new unannounced project. But as we speak, and as you're listening to this video, there are a lot of people out there working on The Division 3, again, whatever stage it might be at. And so, given the studio's history with the Division franchise, I think it would make a good amount of sense to bring Red Storm back into the fold, whether that is on the Division 2 or the Division 3, and to essentially just continue on with that decade-old partnership that had existed prior to them going off to work on Heartland. So we will see where things go. This is kind of still a developing story and situation, but I really just wanted to cover the news, pass along what we know for now, and give my thoughts on this entire deal. So there you have it, my friends. That is everything that we know for now regarding the cancellation of XDefiant over at Ubisoft, some of the fallout from that, where we think these developers are going to be moved to now that that game is no more. Definitely both some sad and interesting stuff, so I will be very curious to get your guys' thoughts on this entire situation. Firstly, what are your thoughts on XDefiant's cancellation? Is that something that saddens you? Does it not surprise you? You know, where do you fall there? And what is your theory for where Red Storm and these other development studios will now have their attentions turned to, since XDefiant is something that no longer requires their resources? Whatever you got, leave it down below. As always, I look forward to reading through them. But that is going to do it for me today, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold. Out.